Unmanned Systems in Modern Warfare, version 3. I am not teaching you army doctrine. I am teaching you stuff from my experience, my expertise, my research, my understanding, my interpretation of where I think this is going. With that in mind, let's continue. Interest and need. We are in a new era of war that none of us are used to. The rules have changed. NATO doctrine and TTPs are now failing. The type of economy that exists drives the type of warfare that exists. During World War I, they were witnessing the economy transition from horsepower to heavy industry, and so did their war fighting. The number one output from World War I was combined arms manoeuvre warfare, which we have now been doing for over 100 years. NATO doctrine is a product of the Industrial Revolution. We are now into the era of Industry 4.0, which is the Internet of Things, networking of small devices and robots, software, artificial intelligence and automation, consumer electronics, miniaturization, mass production and FMCG manufacturing. We are witnessing the modern day equivalent of that World War I moment, and when the old ways collide with the new ways, it is laughably one-sided.
10 Ukrainian drone pilots took on thousands of NATO troops in a recent training drill, and it did not end well. In the space of a single day, the Ukrainians, using a mixture of drones currently found on the battlefields of eastern Ukraine and AI targeting software, were able to take out 2 full NATO battalions. NATO troops reportedly struggled to adapt to life on a battlefield where virtually everything can be seen, and whatever can be seen can be hit. In other words, if the Alliance were asked to step onto the battlefields of eastern Ukraine tomorrow, it would get very messy very quickly. It isn't very reassuring to find out that the Alliance can't cope with tactics that its likely adversary has already had years to master. We've now got to play catch-up, and quickly, to ensure that we can fight not just the wars of tomorrow, but the wars of today.
I'm going to break this lesson into 3 main sections: the technology, the threat, the response. The technology. Deep recce and long-range strike is by far the number one method of the two sides killing each other now. So we're going to look at those two things separately and then combine them back together. So we're going to look at the deep recce and the long-range strike. Recce and the transparent battlefield. Back in the old ways, ISR systems were these prestige-level capital assets, which meant they were in short supply and very expensive. So units were having to compete with each other to get access to these capital assets. When you had them, it meant you had to be choosy about where you deployed them. You had to pick your targets based on where you think the enemy is now or where they're going to be in the near future. You couldn't waste this valuable asset. That meant that the battlefield was mostly blind to you, apart from a few small patches that you could actually see because of where you had deployed these assets. So if there was a small unit using some sneaky tactics, they could very easily get around your ISR, so the probability of being spotted was almost zero. For that small unit, part of their TTPs to stay alive was to be that tiny little pixel in this huge ocean, just to run the odds of reducing the odds of being seen. That's now changed. ISR drones are definitely the easiest to understand, but they are the backbone of why unmanned systems have become so dangerous. In the new ways, these have become affordable, almost commercial off-the-shelf consumer electronics. They're available in large numbers, they're consumable, and they're replaceable with short lead times, which makes them expendable like ammunition. They can just be sacrificed to the mission, and you just buy more. Even those bigger ones are available to friendly forces and friendly organisations to just buy them out of the catalogue, exactly like a commercial off-the-shelf item. It means you now no longer need to be quite so targeted with your ISR, because instead you can just flood the area of operations and just monitor every square inch. The probability of being detected is now almost 100% because these machines are just everywhere. One of their key, unique selling points is that it places a minimal burden of weight and support infrastructure need upon the operators. So smaller units are getting these pushed down onto them, giving smaller formations access to an ISR capability beyond anything they've ever been used to. The battlefield now looks more like this. And for those sneaky little units, when you go out there, you are going to be seen. EO, electro-optical, IR, infrared, and RF, radio frequency. All three of those are a form of electromagnetic radiation. Now all that means to you is all three of them are a form of light. The electro-optical, visible light, we understand that because we can see it, it's familiar to us. We understand about camouflage and concealment and the dangers of shining a torch around in the middle of the night. The problem for us is the infrared and the RF is not familiar to us because we can't see it, but the machines can. In the infrared, if you go into an abandoned building that's supposed to be cold and you warm it all up to try to make it habitable, it's the exact same thing as switching on all the lights in the middle of the night. You can't see it, but the machines can. With the RF, if you use a VHF radio, you put up the antenna and you put it onto maximum power, you have created a ball of light with a 20-kilometer radius. You can't see it, but the machines can. Our thermal and RF signature is what's going to get us detected and get us killed. On the transparent battlefield, everything can be seen by something, and the person watching the video feed could be literally anywhere on planet Earth. Strike. Long-range killing power. Long-range firepower is nothing new to us. We've had that for a long time. But with the weapons types that exist now, everywhere, no matter how far from the front line, can be reached by something. The weak link in the chain was finding the target to kill in the first place, but as we've now seen, the probability of being detected now is almost 100%. Therefore, if it can be detected, it can be hit by something. At the start of the war, when Russia invaded Ukraine and they were using forward observer troops with radios to spot and correct artillery fire, there was a delay between detect to strike of about 20 to 40 minutes. That's now changed. Once they started using UAVs as the forward spotter, the artillery crews had a live feed on the target. The delay between detect to strike reduced to 2 to 4 minutes. That is fast. But a new risk emerged for the artillery crews on the transparent battlefield, because if they pull the trigger, the probability of being detected is also very high, which means they can get hit back. If there are good protective umbrellas in place, such as counter battery or even just drone swarms, when they take the shot, the risk becomes that they lose the gun and the crew as the cost for taking the shot to kill the target. That is a key variable for how you now survive in this new age of warfare. You have to be economically unviable to be killed. It is survival of the worthless. You are trying to make yourself so worthless that even though they can see you, even though they can hit you, you have forced upon the enemy a cost versus benefit analysis where the numbers just don't work, so they have no choice but to just leave you alone. They also have a particularly critical weakness because these types of systems are not actually very good for moving targets because there's a delay. When you pull the trigger, depending on how far the target is away, it could take as much as a minute before the round actually lands on target. So if the target changes speed or direction, you miss. That's where these have come into play. These types of systems are dangerous because of their ability to chase down and kill moving targets. You break cover, you run, you get seen, you get chased, you get killed. No one can move. The biggest impact unmanned systems have had on the battlefield is in the counter mobility and fixing effect because it's just too dangerous to move. This is why the Ukrainian front line has been at stalemate for so long. The whole point of the eye-watering arms race that we've been seeing going on is all about trying to find a way to get back the mobility. These things are cheap enough to warrant the use of multiples to kill a single soldier. They're powerful enough to defeat prestige-level armoured vehicles. They are simple bits of kit that can be consumed and replenished in very large numbers. These are very much the weapons of Industry 4.0. They also have the same unique selling point that we saw for the ISR drones, in that because they have a minimal burden on the operators, smaller formations of troops are gaining access to an overpowered killing power beyond anything they've ever been used to. They are very simple bits of kit that are easy and fast to iterate and field new designs based on feedback and experience from the field. The threat tomorrow will not be the same as the threat today. They are going through a generational level of change approximately every 6 months. So at the time of me making this lesson, Ukraine are effectively onto their 8th generation of weaponry, whilst we have barely got started. We are a long way behind. It also means there are a lot of variants out there that now give a lot of very complex attack runs that are now viable. Now have a look at this one. So you knew that there were the grenade dropping drones out there, and you knew there were the kamikaze drones out there. Did you know there are already drones out there on the battlefield with grenade launchers on board? This next one is particularly harrowing, and you need to pay attention to this one. I give to you the FPV ambush. That last one is important because it means now the delay between detect to strike is now down to 2 to 4 seconds. The weak link in unmanned systems, though, is the data link between the machine and the pilot. This one that you're looking at, that thing underneath it is not a bomb. It's a drum containing a fibre optic wire that is anywhere from 10 to 50 kilometers long to connect to the pilot. This cannot be jammed. The signal cannot be traced back to the pilot to kill them. Electronic warfare protection measures are often now useless. The only course of action often available is to get into physical protection or to physically destroy the machine. These are proving to be wildly successful, and the casualty rates are skyrocketing, and they are everywhere. All of the glistening you're about to see is from fibre wire from drones that have been operating in the area. Electronic warfare and signals warfare is now a main centre of gravity in modern warfare. I've been hearing rumours of some very interesting, groundbreaking things being developed that are in the pipeline to mitigate the need for fibre wire. I'll keep you updated in the comments as I find out more. However, we are no longer just talking about aerial vehicles. Aerial vehicles proved highly effective and simple bits of kit able to decimate very top-tier prestige military systems. It has inspired developers to try to do the same again in the sea and land domains as well. Navies have been dreading this happening for a long time because they know that their fleets are going to become obsolete. They have too much value concentrated into too few assets, so a lot of navies are now leaning hard into sea drones. If China was smart, they would be making millions of maritime drones and sending them out into the Pacific Ocean so that when they inevitably invade Taiwan, the US response force cannot get to them to stop them from doing it. The other big one you need to watch is the unmanned ground vehicles, because to put none too fine a point on it, soldiers are in short supply and land operations are getting wildly dangerous.
Ми пішли взагалі в ці всі напрямки в НРК, адже у нас не було іншого вибору. У нас менше людей, на жаль, аніж ворога. Ворог набагато більший кількісно. І щоб компенсувати це, ми вимушені були робити саме роботизовані системи. Адже кожна така система – це заміна деякої кількості солдат наших. Це житті. Тому кожна така машинка, якщо ми б могли б їх масштабувати, наприклад, в величезних кількості, ми б могли замінити бригади.
UGVs are able to remain autonomous and bring some serious firepower to the battlefield, so these are becoming really important to land forces right now. In this next clip, tell me if you can see what's going on here. That was some Russian soldiers surrendering to a UGV. When you saw them looking over their shoulder, there is a UAV above them with a speaker which the Ukrainians are using to speak to them and give them their orders. That was soldiers surrendering to machines. 75% of Russian casualties are now from drone strike, even though approximately 75% of Ukrainian drones never even reach the target. That is wild. Once identified, you have 2 to 4 minutes to live if you're lucky. It is survival of the worthless. Using sacrificial military forces, and this is a big one, counter mobility and fixing effect is the most important effect the drone swarm has brought to the battlefield. And small units are gaining overpowered ISR and killing capability beyond anything they've ever been used to. The threat. Ever since the Cold War, we have known that if/when Russia were to invade NATO territory, the way they would do it is build a massive mechanised army, and they would move through the open terrain, bypassing and isolating all of the complex terrain to leave that for follow-on forces to deal with later. We have always known in NATO that what we would do is arm the crap out of those complex terrains, turning them into fortress fire bases, with the intention of turning the open ground into big kill zones. The goal was to bog them down and put them in a position where they had no choice other than to dig us out of the complex terrain before they could move forward. Combined arms warfare is the warfare of open terrain. What you're seeing here is an arbitrary set of islands from the Pacific. Now, bear with me on this. During World War II and the war in the Pacific, it was this island hopping warfare where we have our island and the enemy has theirs. Both sides are stuck on their island, lobbing long-range fires at each other. Both sides' islands had become fortress fire bases that could reach to each other's islands, but also into the open waters. For the Navy, trying to operate on the open waters around those islands was suicide because they'd be seen and hit. Those open waters had become no-go zones. They were big kill zones that the Navy couldn't operate in. In this island hopping war, you can't operate in the waters, you can only cross the waters to get from your island onto the enemy's island in an amphibious attack. It's launched from my island to land on your island and to take it from you in grisly close quarters battle. In the warfare of Industry 4.0, that is effectively what's happening now on land. By pushing the machines out in large numbers and creating that unmanned hellscape, it denies the use of the open terrain by turning it into shark-infested waters. It has become a war, an island-hopping war of complex terrain. We have our islands, they have theirs. It's an island-hopping war on land. Industry 4.0 warfare is the war of complex terrain. Every offensive is now like an amphibious attack to try to cross the shark-infested waters, not operate in the shark-infested waters. It starts in a complex island and it ends in a complex island.
The best tip I can give you is route planning. They'll drop you off 2 kilometers away and then you have to make a foot movement there. And that's where people are getting targeted during that movement to and from. Leapfrog from position to position. And based on if you hear a drone or not. If you don't hear a movement, then you start that movement towards that next position 200 meters away. No more drones. All right, we go. Another 200 meters. You kind of leapfrog that way. The problem with the Russians, at least what I saw when I was looking through the Mavic, was that a lot of them got lost. They didn't know exactly where that position was. And they just be kind of running around the village until they got struck. I mean, if you don't have a route, if you don't know where you're going, you just know 2 kilometers away is this position that we're going. Oh, man, I mean, you're going to be stuck out there.
Land warfare now has a lot in common with maritime and amphibious operations. The problem is, amphibious attacks are wildly dangerous, especially now. Let me introduce you to the Avdiivka defense.
Say we have a Ukrainian defensive position here. A typical trench dug into a tree line to provide some cover. And here's a Russian armoured column coming to attack it. If the Ukrainians have had time, they will have laid a first line of defences somewhere out in the fields they're guarding. A line of landmines, perhaps also some barbed wire and tank traps. In order to get at the Ukrainians, the Russians will first have to navigate this. If they're lucky, they'll have a tank with a mine plough leading the column that can clear a gap. Otherwise, they'll just have to hope they can steer between the explosives, maybe losing a couple of vehicles along the way. Behind that line of defences will be artillery and anti-tank weapons pre-sighted on routes of attack, ready to open fire the second the Russians drive into them. In the early days of the war, this would have been Ukraine's main line of defense, but both anti-tank missiles and artillery shells are now in very short supply. The main line of defense is now here, a drone zone that is within range of FPVs which will hunt down any vehicles which survive these defenses. For the FPVs to work, surveillance drones have to be in the skies spotting the Russian columns advancing. Orders are then relayed to a drone unit which deploys behind the front line and launches their drones. Guided by the surveillance drones, these FPVs then spread out and hunt down any remaining Russian tanks or armoured vehicles to blow up.
This became so successful that it became standard operating procedure for the Ukrainian armed forces up and down the front line. During the defence of Avdiivka, the Ukrainians were scoring kill ratios of 20-1. However, now there are so many drones available that they can preemptively push those machines forward, which means the Avdiivka defence has now evolved into something far more sinister. It has evolved into what the Ukrainians call the kill zone. Both sides now have so many drones that they are able to preemptively push those machines forward as their main combat power from the beginning. At the tactical level, all along the front line is a desolate no man's land 30 to 50 kilometres deep, infested with killer machines and artillery strikes, a genuine unmanned systems hellscape. It is so saturated with machines that even an individual soldier will get chased down and killed by multiple machines. No large military force can exist in the kill zone.
Combined arms warfare. That has become a suicide mission in this war. And we've got video after video after video showing what these large armored assaults look like as they try to traverse the 20 to 40 kilometer kill zone that is covered with mines, overwatched by Ukrainian artillery, and constantly scanned by Ukrainian drones. I mean, Russia still tries that from time to time, but the results are pretty expected.
It is a grisly skirmish war of small units, killer machines, and artillery strikes. At the operational level, that kill zone is 50 to 150 kilometres deep. Paradoxically, artillery is now a relatively short-range weapon. In the operational kill zone, the threat is very much from that deep recce and long-range strike. Rocket artillery, missiles, long-ranged fixed-wing drones operating at higher altitude and moving faster. These type of drones can carry bigger bombs and heavier, more capable ISR and electronic warfare kit to deliver it to the areas which would normally be safe from their effects. The threat here is from systems with greater capability, but they're more expensive, with longer lead times, and they're not quite as abundant. So here, survival of the worthless really does have a lot more relevance, but it is still a persistent infestation of machines that have been preemptively pushed forward. A kind of emerging threat is the mothership concept, where it is a large, fixed-wing, long-range drone that can travel deep into the operational kill zone and deliver a swarm of close-range kind of FPV, quadcopter-type drones directly onto location. The dangers of the tactical kill zone are spreading. There is a new kind of air defense problem here which has evolved. Using multi-million-dollar missiles or F-35s to destroy drones that cost a few $1,000s, it's a huge mismatch in quantity of availability, lead time, and economics. Conventional air defense has become economically unviable. but also very easy to defeat with saturation attacks. There is a new arms race in this field, but at the moment it's nowhere near ready. It's getting there, but not quite. And at the strategic level, don't think for 1 second our UK bases are safe. I present to you Operation Spiderweb.
Ukraine's shock sleeper drone blitz on Russia's bomber fleet has delivered a hammer blow to Vladimir Putin's nuclear arsenal. The drones and their containers were smuggled into Russia separately and were put together right under Vlad's nose. Clueless lorry drivers then parked the containers next to Russian air bases, where they waited in plain sight. Then, on the morning of June 1, the fleet of flying bombs rose over the far reaches of Russia, and the most daring military operation of the war began. Nondescript shipping containers parked in laybys and verges had attracted little attention before their lids blew open and the drone swarms poured out. Ukraine had also thought about how to destroy the evidence of their attack. The containers were booby-trapped and fitted with explosive devices. They appeared to go off following the successful attack, or if locals started to fiddle with the crates. Russia had no defences to protect their bases and stop them. CCTV recorded other Russian soldiers trying to use anti-drone guns on the craft speeding past, but to no avail. The furthest strike was Belya Air Base, so far inside Russia that the closest neighbouring country is Mongolia. Russia's strength, its size, had become its weakness, with military planners not banking on needing to defend attacks deep inside Siberia.
There is no such thing as a safe rear area. Industry 4.0 is the economy of the Internet of Things, and so is the warfare it creates. Whether tactical, operational, or strategic level, here is what it looks like.
A new phase of the war is emerging, as robot-saturated battlefields become a regular feature of the front line in Ukraine. However, now Ukraine has started using robots to fight robots, and as the pace of combat accelerated, they also started eliminating Russian soldiers along the way. In practice, this development means the establishment of a new form of automated counter-drone warfare. Geolocated footage from the Kostiantynivka area illustrates this transition clearly, as in one sequence, 2 Ukrainian ground drones advance along a road, with the one carrying explosives for an attack, while the other serves as an escort at the front. Suddenly, they detect a Russian FPV drone on the route, positioned to strike passing vehicles or infantry. The Ukrainian operators identify the threat and eliminate it, ensuring safe passage. Additionally, Ukrainian FPV drones fly above, monitoring the ground platforms and extending their awareness. As the column advances, the reconnaissance drone captures burning remnants of destroyed Russian motorcycles and an enemy soldier nearby. An FPV strike drone nearby is dispatched, flies toward the enemy, and eliminates the threat, whereafter the ground drones resume their mission without interruption. The robots are not reacting defensively at the last moment, but are actively clearing the battlefield of hostile systems before further engagement. These missions are possible because ground and aerial drones increasingly operate as a single networked combat team. Aerial drones provide wide area surveillance, detect heat signatures, map trenches, and locate ambush points. They then pass targeting data to ground drones positioned along roads or concealed in terrain. Ground drones act as persistent close-range platforms, holding choke points, escorting movements, or engaging targets with mounted weapons while remaining hidden. Aerial drones also serve as signal relays, extending control range and maintaining links in complex terrain. The result is a compressed sensor-to-shooter loop in which detection, identification, and engagement occur in seconds rather than minutes. At the same time, Ukrainian robotic systems can share targeting data instantly across platforms, allowing a threat detected by one drone to be engaged by another before the enemy can act. Overall, warfare is no longer just humans using machines, but machines actively contesting each other for control of the battlefield. As losses mount and manpower grows harder to replace, the ability to innovate, integrate, and outmaneuver the enemy's robotic systems is becoming one of the most decisive factors of the war.
It is effectively the weaponization of the internet, and as AI improves, it's just going to get worse. These types of patrols are relics of the old ways and will not work in the kill zone. They're going to be seen, they'll be attacked, and they'll have nowhere to go. They're already dead, and there's nothing they can do about it. This needs to end now. Here are the biggest threats. Movement on the battlefield is now one of the most dangerous things you can do. Infill, exfil, redeploy, troop rotations, resupply runs, deploying quick reaction forces. For Kazovac runs, casualties are often having to wait 6 days to be rescued. This is because the biggest impact the unmanned systems have had is the counter mobility and fixing effect. Therefore, combined arms manoeuvre warfare as we know it has been neutralised. Combined arms warfare is now unviable because you'll just take too many casualties. It is the warfare of the Industrial Revolution and the open terrain, and it has become obsolete. When the Russians kept trying this, they lost a total of approximately 10,000 armoured vehicles and about 1 million soldiers killed or wounded in action trying it. The Ukrainian 2023 summer offensive at Robotine failed because they tried to do combined arms manoeuvre warfare the way we in NATO told them to do it. We are witnessing the coming age of Industry 4.0 swarm warfare. With Exercise Hedgehog, we saw what happens when warfare of the Industrial Revolution collides with the warfighting of Industry 4.0 and the weaponization of the Internet of Things. The main method of warfare is a relentless, endless torrent of machines to overwhelm the enemy by sheer bloody numbers.
Shields up, red alert! Fire at will!
Sir, our phasers are having minimal effect and our torpedoes can't track their movements.
Fire everything we've got.
Captain, we are not equipped for this manner of engagement.
Shield frequencies have no effect, sir.
They took out the dish. Shields are inoperable.
That is how you do these amphibious attacks. Bear in mind what we discussed earlier. 75% of Russian casualties are from drone strike, even though about 75% of Ukrainian drones don't even reach the target. We are talking about saturation attacks. The Russian Black Sea Fleet was defeated by a country with no navy, and they did it using drone boats, missiles and UAVs. What do you think will happen to the US Navy if they actually try to take Karg Island from Iran? It is combat of mass production and FMCG manufacturing. As much combat power as your supply chain can churn out.
A few thousand kilometers from the front line, this is where everything starts.
Every 23 seconds in this facility, we have already one drone.
350 3D printers. Today, they can produce 4,000 per day. But the point is that it means that they can produce millions per year.
Those factories, periodically, they pack up and they move location. Right, that was a lot of information. My suggestion to you, go take a 20-minute break. Digest what we've just discussed. Come back when you're ready. See you in a bit. Welcome back. Now let's look at the response. It's not enough to know about this stuff. We need to know how to use this in reality on the ground. So let's have a look at it. For this section, we're going to look at two main areas. We're going to look at lethality and survivability. You can't have one without the other, as you'll soon find out. Lethality and the hunter-killer concept. If Recce and Strike is the main kill chain being used, then the hunter-killer concept is the TTP that utilises that kill chain on the ground. It gives smaller formations of troops access to an overpowered ISR and killing capability beyond anything they've ever been used to. The US Army has also been playing with this, and the phrase I've been hearing coming from them is painfully light and disproportionately lethal. To demonstrate the point, I'm going to talk about a hunter-killer platoon, but it doesn't matter what scale of a unit you're talking about, the principle is exactly the same. The integrated platoon is no more. Instead, the platoon breaks down into small hunter-killer teams. They're given an area of operations, a general direction, appropriate control measures such as boundaries, limits of exploitation, actions on, that kind of thing, and then they are set loose. The commander's role now changes from less of a direct control and more as the owner of the main killing power. The hunter-killer teams are looking for targets so the platoon commander can kill them. We're going to do this by looking at 3 different scenarios. Here in scenario 1, here comes our hunter-killer platoon. In this scenario, one of our hunter-killer teams pushes out their drone and they identify a relatively small packet of enemy forces. In this example, they conclude they can deal with this themselves and they just crack on and kill the target themselves without hassling the commander. Scenario 2. This time, the hunter-killer team pushes out their ISR and they find a packet of enemies that this time is a little bit too big for them. This time, they're going to utilise their platoon commander who has the platoon's main killing power, who will take the shot on their behalf and remove that enemy force from the equation. There are other versions of this where the commander will kind of corral the wolf pack, but for the sake of this lesson I'm going to move on to scenario 3. This is the main event, not the side hustle. This is why hunter-killer teams exist. This time, our hunter-killer team pushes out a drone, and what they find is a group of enemy forces that is enormous. It's at this point where our platoon commander now earns their pips, because they will communicate with a higher formation, say a company, battalion, brigade, something like that, and utilise their firepower, as this allows them to bring down upon the enemy an ungodly amount of firepower in terms of drone swarms and long-range heavy strikes, so they can delete this enemy from existence. Once the back is broken of the enemy resistance, only then do the heavy or manned forces go in to deliver that final hammer blow to roll up that front line and force a retreat. The manned forces are no longer the tip of the spear. The machines go first. Here is a perfect example of doing it wrong. In the hunter-killer concept, the teams are predominantly the hunters and the commander is predominantly the killer. There is nothing stopping us simulating this on exercise to develop the concept whilst we're waiting for the hardware. I also guarantee you're imagining it wrong. In this island-hopping war of complex terrain, this is what the existence of the hunter-killer teams actually looks like.
They decided to adapt and improve on the infiltration tactics employed by the enemy. So infiltration tactics, this is something that we've seen utilized by the Russian military over the course of at least the last year, pretty successfully in a lot of areas of the front. So in terms of what Ukraine did to turn this around, use their own tactic against them, they say the assault force was divided into small squads of around 8 infantrymen each, moving in different directions to confuse the Russians. Quoting the colonel again, he said, "We decided to conduct assault actions simultaneously in all directions, not openly, but covertly, and where we achieved success, we developed it." He said the groups moved constantly forward, without getting into large, serious battles. If we detected the enemy, we mostly tried to destroy them with drones, while the infantry moved on and cut the enemy's logistical routes. Right, so they're sending small groups forward. In this case, they're saying roughly 8, which is a decent-sized squad in the Ukrainian military. But they are not just moving forward, try to find contact and pin the enemy down and then clear that building. They are specifically trying to locate Russian soldiers. When they're located, send that information up so they can be hit with drones or artillery and move on.
Survivability. We've all heard that the best form of defense is a good offense. Totally agree with that. Wouldn't argue. But what's the next question you should be asking? Is, well, okay, so what's the best form of offense? And the answer is one launched from a well-defended position. Lethality and survivability go hand in hand. It's irrelevant how lethal you are if it's too easy to kill you before you get to show it off. In this section, I'm going to look at 2 elements. Hard to find, hard to kill. Hard to find. That is what the UK 1 Division deployable headquarters looks like. That is comically unacceptable. It's easy to find and easy to destroy. There's no such thing as a safe rear area. It's a high gain target and a low cost to destroy. In that cost versus benefit analysis, this for the enemy is a bargain. Russia wouldn't even need to waste their Kinzhal or Iskander missiles on this. All they would need to do is send a fleet of Shahed fixed-wing kamikaze drones, which depending on variant have a range of 1,000 to 2,500 kilometers. This could just be annihilated by a small squadron of UAVs, and the enemy has hundreds of thousands of them. It will be found, it will be hit, and people will die.
Well, it's official. We are now getting FPV UAV footage recorded by extremist groups in the Middle East recording strikes on U.S. facilities. An Iranian-backed Iraqi militia, specifically known as Kataib Hezbollah, which is part of the Islamic resistance in Iraq, basically an Iranian proxy, posted the FPV UAV footage from a recent attack that they conducted against Victory Base, which was formerly known as Camp Victory, which is a pretty major U.S. military logistics hub located adjacent to Baghdad International Airport in Iraq.
It is a war of survival of the worthless. No large formation can exist. If you truly need something this concentrated, it needs to be deep, deep, deep underground. Let's adapt. Here is our big HQ. What we're going to do is break it down into smaller packets and disperse it into different areas. Firstly, as horrible as COVID was, it did teach us how to work and collaborate remotely. But what we've done here is we've broken our headquarters into smaller, more worthless packets to mess with the enemy's cost versus benefit analysis for when they're choosing to take the shot or not. But it's a system, and each one of these packets is a single point of failure which we need to resolve. So we're going to build in some resilience. We're going to do that with another alternate headquarters, which again we're going to break apart into small packets and disperse into different areas. This now messes with the enemy's cost versus benefit analysis even further, because now, even if they take the shot, they may not get the effect that they're hoping for. Because if one of these packets does get destroyed, there is another one on standby ready to take over if it goes dark. Things will get hit, things will get destroyed, and people will get killed. Nothing and nobody must be too valuable to lose. And if you do lose something, the system must be able to continue working. And to really mess with the enemy's cost versus benefit analysis, we're going to use a third one, a fake headquarters, a headquarters of lies, which again, we're going to break apart into small packets and disperse into different areas. Fake locations, fake transmissions, fake frequencies, fake physical command posts, decoys, you name it. Now, the enemy doesn't even know if they're hitting a real target. If everything can be detected, you give too many things to detect, so the enemy has no idea what's real. That to me now looks like a swarm. Swarm attacks, swarm defences, swarm headquarters. These will need to be talking to each other, so swarm communications. And they'll need logistics, so swarm logistics. Swarm upon swarm upon swarm. In this slide there are two Land Rovers. The one at the top is camouflaged, the one at the bottom is concealed. We need to know what those two words actually mean. Camouflage is disrupting the light so the enemy doesn't recognise what they're seeing, whereas concealment is blocking the light from reaching the enemy in the first place, i.e. hiding. It's important to understand the difference between those two words as we go into the next slide. Signature management is just camouflage and concealment in those three spectrums we discussed earlier, the EO, the IR and the RF. It's not easy, but it is simple. In the electro-optical, we've been doing this forever. That is nothing new to us. Every soldier is already required to be trained and to be good at this. Experimentation and reality on the ground has also shown that electro-optical detection is even harder when you make good use of decoys. They are now in widespread use in Ukraine. For the IR, there is currently no widely available method for IR camouflage. There's loads of bodged solutions, but it is difficult and there are a lot of companies working on it, but it's not here yet, which means right now in the IR spectrum, the only option is concealment. This is a known critical capability gap. For camouflage and concealment in the RF spectrum, with the camouflage we're talking about deception and noise. So using radio frequencies that exist locally, creating noise and fake transmissions or appearing as a different family of transmissions compared to what we actually are. I have heard stories of Ukrainian headquarters where they'll set up something like a PlayStation with a game like Call of Duty, and they use the in-game chat function as a way of communicating. What they're doing is camouflaging their communications as ordinary internet gamer traffic. For concealment, this is where we're talking about terrain screening, turning the power down, relay jumps, hardwire connections, and directional antenna to make sure the RF light doesn't reach the enemy in the first place. Whilst the enemy is hunting for our location, they will zero in basically in the reverse order of the spectrums as I presented them to you. The RF is the form of light that allows the enemy to conduct that wide area search whilst they're hunting for us. For a lot of us, that puts us in a catch-22 because we need to generate that light and make it go as far as we need to be able to communicate, especially if you're communications units. This is going to be a big problem for you. But it means all of us need to challenge ourselves to be good at cam and concealment, not only in the EO, but good with the IR concealment and good with our RF cam and concealment. Let me show you how. That's you in your location or your vehicle. That is your electro-optical signature. That is your infrared signature. And that is your RF signature. An enemy drone could have been hunting for you in the RF spectrum for hours before you even realise there's a problem. But if you have some method of detection to spot it early enough and kill your radio signature, you force that enemy to continue searching for you in the IR and EO spectrums in that area that's just that little bit too wide and makes it a bit difficult. It means you can remain survivable by being hard to find if you have good RF cam and concealment, if you have early enough detection, if you have an IA drill that kills your RF signature, if your IR concealment is done properly, if your electro-optical cam and concealment is done properly, if you use decoys, and if you have an RF deception plan trying to draw the enemy to the wrong location. If you do these things, you can remain hard to find. But you must not give any kind of contact UAV type of transmission over the radios, because otherwise that will be the flash of light that gets its attention and gets you killed. You just go dark. Hard to kill. Heavily fortified versus highly mobile. Humans' ability to defend themselves is the last-ditch line of defence. If the enemy humans have managed to get past all of your machine forces, chances are they're probably quite good at being soldiers. For us, that means it will be unacceptable to be ill-equipped or incompetent to have a fight. Inside these islands of complex terrain, if it descends into human versus human combat, it will be close range. And you're going to have the stomach and the aggression to outmatch them. Experimentation and experience from the ground has also shown that small arms fire has proven surprisingly important, again as a last-ditch effort to save yourself against machines. A Ukrainian infantry section, when they go out, they take with them 2 shotguns for the purpose of shooting down UAVs. But there's a problem with that.
And so, like you said, it's a big pucker factor with having to wait for the target to approach you and letting you get a clear shot. And so it's you're seeing typically between 30 to maybe 50 meters at a maximum distance with a 12-gauge shotgun.
I'm sure we've done enough talking. Let's see what this is like when it's coming in from about 200 yards, and so we can see the actual speed.
Yeah, we only get louder.
Well, that sucks.
Oh my God.
Can you imagine waiting until like 30 meters with a shotgun?
Yeah.
5.56 anti-drone rounds now exist for our rifles. The way they work is when the round leaves the barrel, it breaks apart like shotgun shot, but the cone is much tighter, so it travels much further and gives you much more range to take aim at enemy UAVs. Although you may not have them yet, there's no reason you can't start practicing as if you do. However, there is still a problem with this type of defense.
Hey, show us how maneuverable these things are. POV, me getting killed by a 17-year-old.
How the f did you shoot those things?
Let's take a look at how much it takes to get back your mobility. Here we have a very small unit, no more than 6 or 8 soldiers, woefully underpowered until we apply the hunter-killer concept, and let's see what happens when we do. They've brought along with them some ISR capability to go hunting for enemies as an early warning, and lo and behold, there are some enemy. This enemy is opening fire, and they are planning to launch their little amphibious attack, so they're crossing the shark-infested waters to try to get into our island. All we need to do is stop them from getting in, because what we've done is we've brought along some FPV drones which we've pre-positioned to do ambush strikes.
And then we have our drones in close in order to be ready to strike, but our drones are sitting on top of rooftops. We're trying to only use our ISR up loitering so that we mitigate your Alpha Team's ability to see where they're at. Just massing drones now it's just strike, strike, strike as you move to breach. I'm just strong pointed inside of building 9.
That's dead.
What we've also done is we brought some UGVs for some heavy firepower, open fire and break that enemy lock on us. We also knew the enemy was going to bring some UAVs, so we pre-installed some anti-air guns to shoot down their drones. And to play with some experimental new technology for the same problem, we decided we're going to bring some interceptors. Here comes the drone, shoots it down, destroys it.
First, what people are calling Ukraine Shahed killer drones are really a family of low-cost interceptor drones built to get up fast, find a hostile drone, and kill it on the cheap. Some are basically just really fast FPV-style drones, while some are a little more complicated than that. Some of them might ram the target while others use a small warhead, but they all do one thing, and they do one thing relatively well, and that is kill Shahed-style drones.
We also brought along with us some anti-drone missiles, so more enemy UAVs, big missile comes in and destroys it.
Cheap drones are changing air defense economics, and Sweden's Saab recently unveiled a purpose-built answer. In late August 2025, the company introduced Nimbrix, a small fire-and-forget counter UAS missile designed for the low-end drone threat. The idea is straightforward. Deliver a short-range, lower-cost hard kill option that sits between gun systems and traditional V-shored missiles, scalable for mass deployment and easy to network inside layered defenses.
That last one, the Nimbrix, is a big deal. It's about the size of a baguette, weighs less than 3 kgs, has a range of about 5 kilometers, and they only cost about $10,000 each. They're made from 3D printed parts and commercially available electronics. It's a real step change in defense manufacturing because those are designed for heavy consumption and rapid replenishment. And the last thing our little unit here is going to do is call someone higher up and borrow their firepower to remove this last enemy from the equation. Firstly, look how quickly our underpowered little unit suddenly became overpowered. Secondly, look how much it takes in investment in hardware, time and energy to regain mobility. The loss of the mobility is the whole reason this eye-watering arms race is going on that we've been witnessing. Using the hunter-killer concept is critical, whether you want to push things forward to defend your position, or if you want to retreat. That is what it takes. From now on, this is your fieldcraft. If you are one of those hunter-killer teams out there operating in the field, it's a war of complex terrain, and this is the sort of place where you'll be operating. It requires completely different skill sets and different sets of TTPs, which we need to retrain ourselves to be comfortable with this as our primary method of conducting ourselves. We need to reject the idea of continuing to practicing our soldiering skills in big open fields. It's not gonna work. The common thread, however, in all of these environments is going underground, or more specifically being heavily fortified. Everywhere is under saturation attack. Some amount of enemy combat power is going to get through. Your situation and which kill zone you're in just changes how much of it is getting through to you. No matter what, everyone is taking hits. In heavily contested areas or static facilities, it is the primary mechanism above all others. Fortification is not optional. Even mobile units move strong point to strong point. The balance between heavily fortified and highly mobile is on a sliding scale. If you need more of one, you probably need to sacrifice some of the other. It's sort of like a zero-sum equation. But you will find you can't 100% sacrifice one for the other. You still need some element of both. There is also no universally correct answer. It's completely contextual based on your unit, your task, your location, your situation. Therefore, it requires good decision making by individual unit commanders on the ground. More of us need to make sure we really understand this stuff in order to make those good decisions. In heavily contested areas like the tactical kill zone, where it's balls to the wall warfighting, you need to lean hard into heavily fortified because mobility is almost zero, and so is stealth. There, the trend is for humans to be heavily fortified and the machines are the mobility, and let them take the casualties trying. In the operational kill zone, you can get back a lot of your mobility, but remember, there is no such thing as a safe rear area. Those rear areas are still coming under a saturation attack from the enemy, so an amount of enemy combat power is still going to get through. Here, you are still going to get harassed.
Donetsk has been held by Russia since 2014, so this is a major logistical hub trying to keep the entire Donetsk front supplied. This medium-range strike zone is what Ukraine has really focused on in 2026. Now, turning to this first footage that was released by the 1st Ukrainian National Guard Corps Azov, they say they control enemy logistics near Donetsk. Pilots of strike UAVs are hunting for Russian logistics in the far operational zone. Drones keep all logistics routes around Donetsk under control. Not so long ago, the occupiers felt completely safe there. But from now on, all military targets moving on roads around Donetsk will be destroyed. There is no safe rear for the occupiers. Ukrainian drone operators from the 1st Corps of the National Guard Azov's unit have been systematically targeting Russian military logistics routes in and around occupied Donetsk, including areas more than 50 kilometers from the front line. Footage released by the unit shows Ukrainian drones operating directly over central Donetsk, including near the Donbas Arena Stadium. Video evidence published by the unit shows drone strikes against Russian logistics vehicles, including transporting personnel, ammunition, and fuel tankers. Additional footage indicates Ukrainian UAV presence over key urban locations in Donetsk, suggesting expanded operational reach. This is significant in a lot of ways. So when you look at and we're going to get into Russia, Magyar birds actually just hammering air defense systems throughout eastern and southern Ukraine, those are only good for larger drones. So when you get a smaller drone at a longer distance, things like the Buk air defense cannot target it and effectively shoot it down. So when you get FPVs 50 kilometers over the front or beyond the front, it changes how you have to defend.
During that video, what if I told you there was a white car on that road with Vladimir Putin himself on board? It faded into the background. You did see it, you just didn't understand that was the thing you should have been paying attention to. In the operational kill zone, that kind of mentality is how you maintain a lot of your mobility. But unfortunately, no matter what you do, an amount of people will get spotted and attacked. For you in logistics, you will be obvious targets and you're likely to take fire. It's going to be really difficult to stay completely hard to find. Your static locations are probably going to have to lean hard into being heavily fortified. And being mobile is always going to be dangerous. The moment you start trying to run logistics, you are in combat, in a hunter-killer offensive, on the move, fighting your way to the destination. You'll need to be able to absorb the hit and ensure you can afford the casualties you're going to take without the mission being defeated, which is why stuff like this exists.
We're in an undisclosed location, obviously, because it's a very sensitive site. But as you can see, the chain production is booming, doesn't stop at all. And well, there's a good reason for that, because the front line at the moment needs these kind of drones.
In a war where any movements can get you killed by a drone, land robots now account for 90% of the Ukrainian army's logistics, according to The Guardian. In January, Ukraine's armed forces carried out a record 7,000 ground drone operations, making these drones a key element in any operation.
These models can go to up to 14 kilometers per hour. It's the optimal speed for stability. And they can have a charge of like roughly 200, 250 kilos. Which makes them ideal to bring logistics.
They deliver aerial drones, spare components, batteries and ammunition directly to troops who cannot be reached any other way.
We lose ground robots every single day.
The average UGV survives 1 to 2 weeks on the battlefield.
Basically, the cost of production can vary between $11,000 to $15,000, $16,000, which also make them relatively cheap, well, obviously compared to the life of a soldier.
If you come from a kind of fairly specialised unit, for example, communications or intelligence, you have a particularly special type of problem. The very fact of what you are instantly packs in a lot of value, no matter how worthless you try to make yourself. So the cost versus benefit analysis numbers always works in favour of the enemy to justify taking the shot. The first rule is hide what you are and be worthless. The second rule is hard to find and hard to kill in the complex terrain. And there is the breakdown of the hard to find and hard to kill principles. I recommend you take a screenshot of this.
Really not sticking to the first rule there, sir.
That is a picture from a peacetime tasking. But I'm sure a lot of you would recognise that this is exactly the same sort of thing as you would do on a tactical exercise as well. This is not going to work. This is representative of literally every possible bad decision in one photo if you're doing this on a tactical exercise. It's obvious what it is. It's obviously valuable. It's easy to find. It's easy to kill. It's not fortified and it's not mobile, and it's just sat in the shark-infested waters. From a practicality sense, it probably means you're going to need small UAS organic to yourselves so that you can scout ahead of where you're going. Being mobile, you're going to have to move strong point to strong point, selecting locations that offer an amount of fortification with minimal build-up work so you can hide. You'll need to consider how to make your unit blend in with the background noise so the enemy doesn't realise you were the thing they should have been paying attention to. Likely, you're going to have to get used to operating in far smaller teams than you were used to, maybe 5 to 6 people, to minimise the vehicles and the equipment and to keep yourself worthless. You'll likely have to rethink the kind of equipment you can use so that it runs on battery power, because then instead of bringing generators, you can start looking at these great big lithium-ion power banks you can get. You're likely going to have to get used to being lean, light, basic and minimalist again. If you overbuild your location or bring too much useless junk, you trap yourselves by sacrificing your mobility. The austere life is back for you.
If you want good food, don't join the army.
Andy's rules of survivability for logistics. Rule number 1. Logistics movements are an offensive hunter-killer operation. Act like it. You are not on a Tesco run going down the M3. Rule 2. Hard to find, hard to kill. Absorb hits and devalue your losses. You're going to take those hits. They have to be affordable. And here are my principles for hard to find and hard to kill for logistics. And here are Andy's counter UAS IA drills. I've sort of hijacked the Army's approach to this with the Red Eye, Hawkeye and Longbow, but the actual content I've completely overhauled because I didn't think it was right. So I've now made these mine. This is my current belief on Andy's counter UAS drills, but it is still in review. Again, I suggest you take a screenshot. Ultimately, it all boils down to the hunter-killer concept and survivability. If you apply these ways of doing things, it's a game changer. Remember, the strongest form of defense, yes, is a good offense. The strongest form of offense is one launched from a well-defended position. This is exactly why Iran is proving so difficult to defeat. I'm now going to give you some homework. In the pinned comments are some videos which I'd like you to watch. If I've done this correctly, I have now turned you into innovators capable of extracting your own ideas from new information. I'd like you to watch those videos and have a crack to see if that's worked.